Hello and welcome to the first in a series of interviews with a wide range of high-profile ESG experts. Today we are talking to Yosin Peak, Head of EMEA at GRESB, about GRESB and ESG Benchmarking. Yosin, for the GRESB reports, you collect and assess a lot of data, and you also talk to a lot of market participants. Do you already see a broad shift in the real asset industry towards sustainable goals?
Yes, thank you, Michael, and thank you for having us. Definitely. What we're seeing is a big. So GRESB was set up more than 11 years ago. It was set up by 3 large pension funds. Very simply, they kept on asking all these questions of their fund managers, and instead of getting the information in an Excel spreadsheet, which was then lost, they said, let's get these guys to report into a database. So it's a very simple, in a way, I would say, collective data gathering scheme for ESG data. And 11 years ago, and throughout that time, it was much more a voluntary scheme introduced by large institutional investors, but not so, the market participants were not so behind it. What we're seeing, and that's the big shift we're seeing in the last 2.5 years, we're seeing that a lot of fund managers themselves are realizing that if they continue to do business without taking these type of metrics into consideration, they will actually be out of business within 5, 10, maybe 20 years. So there's a real business. The business is really stepping up, and not just under the pressure of legislation. That is, legislation is definitely one of those sticks that is hitting the market a little bit. Mm-hmm. But there's also a true stepping up, also under the pressure, of course, of younger generations. Anybody under the age of 30 has got a completely different worldview than old people like me above 50 thinking, how much time is it going to take? So this clear and pressing danger of climate change and ecological degradation and even also social problems are really coming to the fore to business in not just the real estate business. But we're seeing in the real estate side that people are realizing, especially on the climate change side, on the environmental side, that they need to step up. And that's done under the 2 big pressures are the institutional investors who say we want better management of our assets, and of course legislation and regulation saying we need to get better at doing this together.
And regarding the regulation, at least since the EU Action Plan of 2018 and the disclosure and taxonomy regulations, how prepared is the industry for the upcoming EU regulations?
Well, in a funny way, and we're very much at the middle of that. So more than 5 trillion of assets are being reported to GRESB. That's not just Europe, but roughly, almost half of that is in Europe. So a large chunk. We're really at the heart of the ESG reporting of the real estate industry. So when the European Commission came with this mandatory disclosure. Especially the mandatory disclosure. The taxonomy was still a little bit, if you really want to have your fund called a green fund, then you have to adhere to all these norms. So that was still a little bit, that was less scary for the industry, arguably. But now that we have a mandatory reporting, actually today is the 10th of March, of course, saying. So it's actually starting at a principal level today. And so we've been inundated by managers and investors saying, guys, is GRESB up to the task? Because the ESG data gathering and data giving has been outsourced to GRESB, we need to actually be able to deliver these mandatory reports back to the industry. So, and we're working very hard to do that. So currently GRESB is gathering a large part of the data that is necessary for this regulatory for mandatory reporting, but we still lack some of especially on the social indicators. An example is the gender pay gap. We ask currently, are you looking at the gender pay gap? Are you checking what that is? But we don't actually ask what is your gender pay gap. And the EU currently, in the current setup, good news for Tina and me, is actually asking, what is the gender pay gap that you have. So in that sense, and just to be clear, it's still, we're seeing legislation being formed in a very fast way. So typically gets a little bit messy. So it's not completely crystal clear which of the questions are going to be mandatory, which are going to be voluntary, and even the exact wording has not been formulated yet. So things are still a little bit moving targets. On the other hand, we clearly know that environmental. So what is the CO2 emissions? What is your energy usage? How are you working towards bringing that down? And social, and also the governance issues are coming into the heart of business and business communication.
Yeah. Okay. As GRESB has been around for much, and there hasn't been any other benchmarks on the market at this time, how were the questions and criteria developed for the assessment? Some, such as employee health or well-being measures, are not entirely self-explanatory in terms of sustainability, at least at a first glance. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the history of developing the benchmarking. Maybe
great question.
Some insights.
Yeah, indeed. So just let's go back to the beginning of GRESB again. So there were these 3 pension funds. Currently there are 100 pension funds, but they wanted to get good data. And GRESB has always said we remain hierarchical. So we put the institutional investors are the guys really calling the shots. So it's in the end, it's the institutional investors who said, these are the topics we find important. And also very important, we do this at a portfolio level. So there's always a lot of confusion because, of course, at the asset level, you have all the certifications, but we're not a certification scheme. That's at the building level. We do this at the portfolio level, whereby certifications is actually an input into the GRESB assessment. The more certifications you have, that means the better quality data you have at an asset level. So you get some extra points for good certified buildings. So it's an input into what GRESB is doing. But indeed, your question: how do we come up to these questions? So it's the institutional investors questions list, basically harmonized and put together. If we look on the social side, and that's maybe where the background to your question comes from. This is a global benchmark, global assessment, global benchmark, therefore. And in some countries, of course, the health and well-being criteria are a lot less developed than, say, in Germany or in the Nordics. So we often have the Nordics, the country people from the Nordics saying, yeah, but Josine, this is a silly question. In Denmark, we are obliged to do a lot more for the, health and safety and well-being of our employees than what you're asking here. And then we say, yeah, this is indeed a global questionnaire. Just say that you're doing it because you're legally obliged to do it. So yes, of course, it's a yes for participants in countries where that is a legal obligation. So indeed, we're bringing together a global community of real estate funds. You might say, well, then it gets a little bit too diluted because it's not super interesting how a German fund compares to a fund in Indonesia, for instance. But the nice thing is, and that's what this enormous database allows us to do, is to make very precise peer benchmarking. So if you're a fund of offices in Paris, you can then be compared to other funds with offices in Paris. And that's where peer benchmarking, so on the one hand, you have this broad benchmarking towards the whole universe, the whole world. But on the other hand, you can also get very precise peer benchmarking. And peer benchmarking, it sounds like a big word, but in the end, it's just this whole questionnaire, again, telling you this is where you stand, and this is where your very comparable peer group stands. So, and that's where we're a mission-driven organization. So we like to get a little bit of healthy competition going between, one office building portfolio in Paris and the other 5. If all the other 5 are doing something very good, which is part of this questionnaire, you have a large chance that next year that guy is going to do it as well. So it's really we are using competition in a almost like a playful but positive manner to get people to improve together.
If I was an investor and I have evaluated my portfolio with GRESB. What do I get out of it? Now I know that I'm, let's say, 42nd out of 50 in terms of sustainability. And now?
Yeah, indeed. I would see it much more, and that's why it's important to I would see it much more as a dynamic game. What we're setting up. So indeed, it's not at all the idea to, first of all, if you're not playing, you don't know actually you don't have a transparent view of either if you're a portfolio manager of how your portfolio is doing versus competitors, and if you're an institutional investor, you want to actually have all these different portfolios to report to GRESB. And then what we have some beautiful portfolio management tools which actually aggregate everything up to the investor level, and then the investor can actually talk with his constituents, saying the overall picture of my real estate portfolio, at least for the part that is reporting, looks like this. And through time, and then it can drill down to see which fund manager is actually not doing so well. And then very important, that whole engagement discussion. It's actually very important that engagement discussion is a positive discussion. So the moment it becomes punitive, people will say, "Oh no, I'm not going to do this." It's already quite a lot of work to report to GRESB. It's not something you do, in a Friday afternoon. It takes 1 to 2 weeks to get all this data together and to deliver it to us. So it's a lot of work. And if we don't actually help each other to improve together, we will come into a very negative spiral together. And so we're trying to say, and we're actually, it's one of my jobs. I have the great pleasure of talking to all these institutional investors and making sure, first of all, that they understand how important they are, because they are the ones allocating capital, and on the other hand, making sure that they become, like, how do you say, positive teachers to help the managers improve. So and it's really quite beautiful to see. Communication, of course, on the financial side of the market is quite cutthroat and very competitive. On the sustainability side, it is much more cooperative. There's a different way of looking at these things, and we really realize that we all need to improve, and not just a handful, because then we will still not be. We will, in the end, we need to make this transition in time and at scale. So there is a real a pressure from what we need to do.
Thank you, Josine. A wonderful resume of our first interview. Next time we will talk about the weighting of ESG and how to collect the necessary data. Dear audience, thank you for watching. Stay with us and above all, stay curious. Bye-bye.